got grandchildren, the world's turning upside down, backwards.
Why don't you bring them to a park and have fun?
I'd never bring them down. They live in Arcata. That's close enough.
I hope
A duck.
Absolutely right, sweetie. This whole thing, this whole costume, dragging them in through this is nonsense.
Hello and welcome to Thursday Night Talk. This is our weekly talk show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues and the local personalities. I'm your local host, Talvi Freed, and I'll be here with you for the next hour. Remember, you can tweet at us during the show. Just type that @ symbol and then access Humboldt. Joining us tonight, we've got David Frank, Senior Analyst for People and Culture Systems at Internews and also co-host of Redwood Wonk, which you can hear right here on KZZH after this show. We've got Æpryl Nikolai from Redwood Pride and Access Humboldt intern, Jim Glover as well, chair of the Humboldt County Human Rights Commission. Welcome to you all.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Of course, I'm glad that you guys are here. Tonight's topic is a little bit of an iffy one. We are going to be discussing specifically a hate speech incident which occurred at the Redwood Pride Halloween Festival. Here's a little soundbite of it for everybody to understand what happened there.
So, can you guys explain shortly and briefly what your issues are with this event for me, please?
You're at a public school indoctrinating children where you'll confuse their gender, and they don't need that. They deserve a childhood. Do you understand? Children deserve
let
a
them be
childhood.
children. You
They don't
understand that?
deserve to be confused about their gender. Okay, these are public funds doing this. A lot of us were persecuted for the last year and a half for our beliefs as Christians, where I will not conceal my identity. Some of you like to conceal your identities and change your appearances and change your genders, but we believe we're fine the way we are, and children should believe they're fine the way they are too. They don't deserve to have people confusing them about their body part, and furthermore, they don't even need to be thinking about their body parts yet. They haven't even gone through puberty. Does that not make sense to you
And
as
look
a
at
woman?
the suicide rate
I'm
later.
asking her a question. Does that not make sense to you as a woman
And
to
so,
not confuse
what if, what if they feel that way in themselves, and by you not supporting them, that is confusing them?
I support everybody and love everybody. I'm protecting the children for being who they were made to be without people interfering with them, telling them their gender might be different or wrong. When they were born, the doctor said it's a boy, it's a girl.
So if your
That's
God
what
is
gender
said to
is.
love everyone and they feel that that's who they are from birth, then how
My
does
God's
your
into
belief...
protecting children, and I'm into protecting children from pedophiles and people that are preying on them. Why does a drag show need a child audience? Tell me that. Why does a drag show need a child audience? And why do you need children involved? They're not
they love
sexual yet. They're children.
You say sexual all the time, right? But how many of you?
Here's
Mine
about
don't.
that. I don't have time for a conversation like that. These children are going to be subjected to your perversion, and it's
100%.
wrong.
Do you let your
It's
children
wrong.
watch TV?
It's none of your business what I do with my children. None of your business. This is a public school. That's why this
We're
is
here
my
sticking
damn
up for the
business.
community against
And
you
this is a
guys'
drag
crap.
show, and you're preying on
No,
children.
you're not. You're here to
You
help
are preying
indoctrinate
on children as predators, as pedophiles.
Oh my word! Can you believe it? They
As
want to protect
pedophiles.
children.
I'm not
Fucking lame,
You're
dude.
grooming children.
Why?
for pedophilia.
Why?
Oh, the irony in that woman's speech. So we're going to be discussing that as well as a few other violent and non-violent incidents that have happened in recent months. What do these types of incidences mean for our community? Is this a nationwide trend that's just finally appeared here? and what can be done about it? Let's just go ahead, because I know I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm the host, so I'm going to pass it immediately off to April. You've not been on our show before, though. What did that bring up for you?
It was very interesting because a lot of what was being said just then was being repeated over and over, and they really weren't having much argument for it, just that their opinion was completely correct and that everything we were doing is wrong. They initially were supposed to be protesting the fact that there was a drag show and an all ages event. That was what their original issue with it was, but there's no way that performers would be being lewd at an all ages event. So
that is the hope, David.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just do a little brief intro here and before I pass over, but I was actually there at one of the tables representing Access Humboldt, and we were speaking with folks about membership and participation in community conversation, the ability to invite people to produce media content, get involved in expressing themselves. And we thought it was a great place that, it was a mingling of folks, a diverse group of people from all over the community, and that we'd really get to speak with people one-on-one. And mostly everybody that I talked to there was fantastic. But of course, around 2 p.m. we got word that there was going to be a protest, and then the American flags were, coming across the grass right in front of where our table was. So I kind of had a front row seat. I was actually, able to speak with a few people. I only got one person to agree to go on the record and be recorded, but that's because really I wasn't there for that purpose. I was more trying to be open-minded and just learn a little bit, and I did. But I'll just say this one last piece for my intro, that Howard Zinn famously said, you can't be neutral on a moving train. So no matter how neutral I tried to be there, obviously it was not an option. But I did at least try to tease out what the perspective was, what these people brought, not just what was anger and ignorance, but what was behind it. And basically, if I was going to distill it down, these folks had a patriot frame of reference, their own defined self-appointed patriotism, and in the ongoing culture war. And so there was this pent up, for lack of a better word, aggression, based on the country's COVID response, masks and vaccine mandates, critical race theory, school curriculum, etc. So there's all this underlying fundamental anger, but it was targeted and focused in a way that was completely not constructive. And, although there wasn't violence, from what I saw there at all, I didn't see any actual violence. And I spoke with the police officers at length, and they didn't see any actual assaults or anything like that. It was more just a really uncomfortable confrontation of people who did not see eye to eye about what e pluribus unum means. One from many, one out of many, and so we'll pick up more on this, but realistically, it was one of those things where I agreed to be here today because I think it's important for people to pick this up as a starting point for us to try to really combat this ignorance with a conversation about that moves us forward.
Jim.
Well, I really regret that I was out of town for this weekend, because it was the intention of the Human Rights Commission to have a representation at the event. We've attended previous Pride parades in Old Town, and I've had an involvement with organizations going back to the 1980s, where we had to be concerned, but the public was much more willing to live and let live at that point than some members seem to be now. And it's unfortunate because it's hard to have a dialogue when people are screaming epithets and accusations that have no basis in fact at all. The Human Rights Commission just at its last meeting adopted a policy where we are developing a rapid response program where we will respond to incidents like this. Doesn't have to just be about pride, but it could be almost any place where human rights are attacked, and that goes in all directions. And this obviously may be our first candidate for an article that we will produce and try to present our point of view.
Thank you, Jim. April?
Yeah.
I'm curious because there have been several incidences, not just this one, that have occurred. And I just want to put it into a perspective of somebody who was not there, but has seen some horrendous. I'm having trouble understanding how somebody could come in and start screaming about pedophilia and sexualization of children and accusing other people of that when that's exactly what they are doing in that moment. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts on kind of the hypocrisy of that, of what this person was preaching while screaming it around children.
Yeah, they definitely got rather loud, and that was making myself a bit uncomfortable. The whole hypocrisy of it was probably the hardest to bear through, honestly, because they weren't talking, they weren't trying to communicate a point or listen to other points. It just kept coming back to really hard insults in general, and they're right and we're wrong. I really had a hard time dealing with a lot of them because there was a number of them, but then they would move and split up and start going after whoever else was near them.
I heard that several members of the Perpetual Indulgence actually had stepped in, and they do wear wonderful, beautiful outfits. And they were using their capes to kind of try to shield the children from these people holding very offensive signs that I honestly don't think children need to be seeing. And I'm always impressed at how very head held high the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence has been. They've been active members in the community where they volunteer constantly and consistently. They used to put on softball games to raise funds for trail projects and such matters. And I almost wish I had one of the protesters here to talk to us about why they decided to choose this one moment. And I get that, like, I hear them that they feel persecuted, but do you have any insight into how the human psyche can come to that conclusion that they're being persecuted when they're screaming at people to try to persecute them?
Are you asking anybody in particular?
I was more asking April, but Jim, if you've got an answer, absolutely. You are on the Human Rights Commission.
I don't know if I have the answer, but it's a sign of the times that we're in right now. People don't ask questions first. They make statements first and then followed up with more statements. It's unfortunate. It would have been nice perhaps to have a representative of the group that was there on tonight to talk sanely and calmly with each other and to better understand each other's point of view.
Which, if somebody is out there listening, we do have a phone number you can call. This is a call-in show. If somebody listening out there wants to call in and either share their experiences or why they feel how they feel, the phone number This is going to be a very long number. You're going to need a meeting ID, the phone number, and a meeting ID. The phone number is 669-900-6833. Again, the phone number 669-900-6833. The meeting ID 511-886-8501. Again, the meeting ID 511-886-8501. David, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, just for the purpose of being a balanced conversation, and also so that people can see things for themselves of what they, what went on Sunday, and not to provide a platform for people who aren't showing up to be thoughtful, but just to again in the issue of fairness. One of the gentlemen, and maybe I shouldn't call him a gentleman, I don't know, but he was relatively polite to me, that was there. His name was Donnie Creekmore, and he had a video camera, two cameras, it looked like, maybe two phones or something, but he was recording for Lost Coast Populist. So they're an organization that's out there, and you can kind of see what their perspective is. I'm not sure exactly the evolution of that organization, but he did show up with the intention of filming and creating some content. He called himself a journalist. So there is a voice out there that we will be able to invite to the table. My understanding is that, and again, I'm not speaking for them in any way. This is just sort of what I gathered, but that he recently took over this platform from a different person named Adam Lustig, who was there also, and I heard Donnie interviewing Adam, and Adam, the first thing that I heard him say when I was there over by the group, I wasn't there the whole time, but I went over there after I saw the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence open their capes or head gowns or whatever you call them. I'm sorry, I don't know the name, but to cover to sort of protect, shelter, or shield the children from the having to witness the spit flying out of people's mouths. They screamed at everybody. But so anyway, my point here is that the first thing that Adam said in that interview was, he said, to their credit, and he was speaking to, I guess, the event organizers or attendees, there was nothing particularly sexual or provocative about the drag show. I don't think the government should get involved in telling people what to do at Halloween events like this. They should stay out of it. But people have the First Amendment right to protest. And so in a sense, these people showed up, in part, at least a couple of them, showed up for the primary purpose of actually just letting it be known that there were people in the community that didn't agree with what was happening. And so while there was tons of hate and ignorance being thrown about, what I heard Adam say was, people just assumed that because I was here with them and I have American flags on me, and because I'm white, that I also have anger and hate issues, or something to that effect. But he said, I'm a patriot American, and you can't assume that patriot Americans are whatever you assume about people, basically. So he was basically projecting and kind of flipping the table and saying that the defense of the community's collective voice in that event at the community center, that somehow that defense against the protesters was in fact an attack on them, which we heard that woman in the intro say, that Christians have been persecuted during the lockdowns. And like I said, I think that's in part because of just the tip of the hat to Jim for pointing it out, that we are in an extraordinary times, and there's an awful lot of folks out there who there's it's trench warfare to a certain extent, and you get cues from people real quickly about whose side people are on, and you project and assume that it's the other, you otherize people. So I'm not making any defense at all of these folks or what they brought to the table, because it was obviously counterproductive and ugly. But at least there was one person there who claimed to be a journalist, and one person who was interviewed who didn't seem off the rails. And instead, he was trying to say, we have our own beliefs, and we're here to let you know we do.
Yeah, that seemed to kind of be a lot of the extent of it, is that they were feeling persecuted because their hardline opinions of what they had defined as genders and how people should be is being minimized because everything else is being more accepted. Both the best I've been able to figure.
We'll be continuing this discussion right after this quick break. You're listening to KZZH. This is Thursday Night Talks. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talks. I'm Talvi Freed, your local host. I'm here with David Frank, Æpryl Nikolai, and Jim Glover. We are discussing the protest that happened by what seemed like a very exuberant group who claim they are Christians and that they have been persecuted. So they decided to attend an event that Humboldt Pride was putting on and scream at people about pedophilia in front of children. I'm sure a lot of questions were asked of the parents that night, like, what is pedophilia? Because of this, Redwood Pride, I mean, it was from Redwood Pride, and Æpryl, you kind of got cut off there because of the break. So if you want to continue what you were saying.
Yeah. I was just saying, basically, that seemed like a lot of their views were being, their point of view is that their views are being diminished because they believe what they believe, and that's not being as accepted anymore. The best I've been able to figure it, but then again, it came very quickly back to a lot of basically homophobic words being thrown out there, and insults, and a lot of insisting that their opinion is absolutely right. And if they were doing that, that would have been fine, but they didn't have to be being so bold about it. Because there's been protesters at things like these before, and mostly they've just been there and been fine and had signs up, and that was it. Only like one or two other events. But these people were actually engaging people and getting in their face.
Which I feel like that happens at protests quite a bit in this area. It almost always seems like there's somebody protesting something outside the courthouse. It's been 10, 11 years since Occupy happened. Then the Tea Party started and everything occurred there. And I feel like there are a lot of groups that cause people to think, to put it politely, which it's almost, I question sometimes, do you want people to hide away, or do you want to know that they exist in our communities? David.
Thanks. I was muted. I was going to say I was kind of hoping that that you came to me on this one, just because, just as a practical matter here, the gist sort of talking to folks for me when I was there, really trying to listen thoughtfully, and I really had to disarm them. I really had to say over and over again, I'm trying to be thoughtful. I really want to know what you have to say about this. Is that there's this flood of things that come into their head when they open their mouth, when they're, not to speak for everybody there, but of course, a few of the people that I talked to that were protesting, what they were saying is just a flood of grievances about the culture and about society, the direction it's trending in. And when you try to like peel away and say, okay, this isn't COVID, we're not talking about curriculum, we're not talking about vaccines, or we just let's peel all that away. You're making the claim that at a Halloween parade and party for the community at the community center, where children and their parents and their grandparents and their neighbors are all having fun, playing on the park, doing their thing, that these folks, that somehow there's something awful happening here. What exactly do you think is happening that's awful? And the, not to restate again what their exact grievances were about people that are different from them, is that they're of the opinion that the things that they hear on their information and news sources are facts, and that there's like a conspiracy, a cabal of globalists who are dominant in universities and governance, and have dominated the political process in certain areas, and that they are harming their way of life, their traditional, whatever that means, value system, but moreover, that their children are the target. And that so when your moral bubble that surrounds yourself and your immediate family, your nuclear family, your children, when that bubble is threatened, you lash out. And so they're in this fight or flight mode. I'm not giving them an excuse, but what I'm saying is that the media, they're pointing to it. They're telling us what's up, is that all of the information sources that they have and all of the social networks that they have are reinforcing issues that and topics and influences that are not tethered to reality. And so they are being manipulated through misinformation and disinformation. And moreover, they're also being told that this cabal, this conspiracy, MSNBC, CNN, mainstream media, government, universities, anybody sort of that's outside their bubble is out to get their children. And so this doesn't end well. Like we really, really do need to engage them with facts. And so I'm not going to get into it. I talked a long time here, but maybe as a follow-up, Scientific American, just as one example, there's tons of great information we could share with people. There's a consensus out there. American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the Endocrine Society, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Psychiatric Association. They all have tons of data about how important it is for us to get this right. And they're saying we're getting it right mostly. So this is where we need to be. We need to go from the trench warfare to the range of peer-reviewed science.
Thank you, David. That is quite a take, which it's true. But I think and I don't want to play devil's advocate ever, not in this situation, though, to try to see from the perspective of them, which, yes, it seems like a brainwashing, but they think that the other side is brainwashed and that we're somehow brainwashing children. Not trying to put we, but I'm going to be on Redwood Pride side here, because it looked like a very fun, colorful event where kids were having a good time. And it's hard for me not to feel like there's nothing wrong with that. I've seen people upset about, the drag community, say, reading to children at the library. And I think that's goofy, because anything that gets kids into reading, and I like to dress up. I'm going to dress up for Halloween. If you want to dress up in whatever outfit you want to, cool. And children, I feel like kids should know how to protect themselves, though. Should they, again, that like screaming like you're pedophiles at people who are just having a good time, it just seems so disturbing to me. And the thing is that if somebody, again, here's the phone number if anybody listening wants to call in and give their perspective, whether it's the same perspective we're we're giving, or a different one, because I do want to hear both sides. What, like, how do you come to a conclusion that that's an okay or acceptable thing to do at any community event? And this is the same when there were anti-Semitic slurs written in Arcata around, I can't remember which holiday it was, but it maybe Rosh Hashanah. There were anti-Black graffiti that's been happening. Somebody was flying the swastika in a window in Old Town, which I like to think of Eureka as liberal, though it's not just this one event where this one group of people is there. There's more out there than, and I don't know how to communicate with someone who just sees so hard that way that somehow everybody else is at fault. Jim, you deal with a lot of people. Like, I mean, I'm not exactly sure your position within the group you're with, though I'm sure you deal with a lot of meetings involving what's going on. And what is your take on everything that's been happening? Because it feels like it's been almost extremist in the last while. And I know this place has a huge history of racism and anti-Semiticism, homophobia, though I felt for a minute it was changing. And now it feels like it's coming crashing back down to people screaming at a kids event.
Yeah, I don't think we're out of the woods by any means. And I can't help but think the irony of the situation that David described, of the children being protected by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, from whom? From the very people who are yelling and screaming. And why do the children have to be put in that kind of a situation? An otherwise fun, playful, harmless event is turned into a confrontation. And it's such a shame that that has to happen, because it doesn't advance anybody's cause even one inch.
There was a number of us there that were saying that there's children right here that you are upsetting by doing this, yet you're saying you're trying to look out for children.
Yeah.
And I would just add too that, you know, the experts, whether it's curriculum experts or the science experts, so whether we're talking about, you know, in schools, how people are getting, you know, children are getting exposed to these more progressive ideas about gender, or actually, you know, once they do explore medical options, the consensus position is do no harm, and the idea is that that's going to be the guiding principle. And you know what? Maybe people are getting it wrong on the margins. There are certain places. You could say that about any policy, any government, any group, any family. People get things wrong. It's not about people not getting things wrong. It's about doing no harm. And what we're seeing is that you can't like calibrate responses to a social issue. You can't build consensus when you can't have a community dialogue. And for this, you know, this is an example of, you know, like, again, I hate to keep saying it, but Jim, you hit the nail on the head, the sign of the times, where we're just scratching that itch to get out there and rage and vent. That seems to be the goal. And then whatever they say after that is, you know, that's a motivation, but that's not an action. They've already sort of, you know, broken the chain of cause and effect by inflicting harm.
My computer is being fixed right now. Though the person fixing my computer just shook his head and was like, "Let kids be kids, goodness sake," and that's a good comment.
Yeah.
Which I think both sides are saying, like, children be children. And there's been studies upon studies done, if we really want to talk about what is healthy for children, where brains are wired, how they're wired. There can be effects of environment, sure, though the data, and I like data a lot more than I like people just talking about things. because data is hard numbers and it proves again and again. And that if you, that's why immediately after I heard that, I said, oh, the irony of saying that they're trying to tell children to be one way. Well, aren't you trying to tell children to be a specific way by saying that they can't explore their identities or wear a costume of a different supposed gender or whatever gender norm you think it is, by forcing them into this little cookie cutter image that causes so much damage, whether it's forcing a child to play a sport they don't want, forcing a child to read a specific type of book when they're more interested in science fiction. It does massive amounts of damage to self-esteem, to their psyche, to the way they challenge the world, which allowing a child to say, I'm interested in this, and in a safe, healthy environment. Obviously, all children should have boundaries, and you should allow them to be safe when they're exploring who they want to be when they grow up. Same with adults. You got to have healthy boundaries if you're exploring who you want to be when you grow up. And that specific woman, I don't know if we ever caught her name, but if she wants to call in, the number 669-900-6833. Again, 669-900-6833. You're gonna need the meeting ID 511-886-8501. I mean, I don't know if anybody else is versed in the data of what is healthy. It's so weird to even that's their stance. They're going to come in, or protesters are going to come in. I can understand protesting so many things. There's so many things out there that are unjust and that need people to show up and say, hey, this isn't okay. I just don't feel like having a differing belief system about people dressing up and having a party. It seems wild to me. April, do you have any take on perhaps the health of children? What is actually healthy for them?
I share the same point of view that it's usually up to the kids. Just the same person that you're talking about. I tried talking with them about this very point and bringing up, aren't you telling kids that they have to be one way or another? And it basically did come down to that their idea was right and that everything that wasn't just the normal male-female system was wrong. And as far as what I think is healthy for kids, it's how the person feels, basically. I've 3 kids of my own, and they're not even sure. One isn't sure, one maybe doesn't know or doesn't care, and the other one really doesn't care either. Don't really see it that way.
I feel like there's a liberal bubble within Humboldt County where, and I wouldn't even call it a liberal bubble. I don't consider myself a liberal, even though some might think I am. And I don't know how to put this exactly, though. It's like, it feels like the safety net sometimes of knowing the groups and the places to go where people are just accepting of everyone else, where you're just there to have fun, dress up how you want to dress up, wear the poofy eyelashes with glitter on them, because that's fun. Everybody should wear those. Makes the world look shinier. And then this happens, and I remember that there is this whole other group that comes through. There was the an anti-immigration movement that's been happening several times. We've got the Arcata Sanctuary Garden, considering it's called Sanctuary, another ironic moment, where I'm looking at these photos and it's, America, USA, where things are just vandalized for what reason? And part of me is like, oh, this must be, not to blame teenagers, though sometimes they do things, though a lot of the teens in this modern world with these modern connections actually seem to be more well-adjusted than a lot of adults out there right now. And what drives people to do this, to deface properties, to, it was distribution of anti-Semitic flyers last around July 4th, holiday weekend. There were people a trans man reported he was targeted, harassed, and threatened in Fortuna, which, let's not forget the past sports issues with school sports where one school would say hate words to another school, it'd be reported, nothing would be done, they'd play again against each other, and it would continue. We don't have much time though. Jim, do you feel like this is, like, what do we do about this trend?
Well, it isn't easy, but I think whatever steps can be made to engage people in a dialogue, in a civilized dialogue, that's got to happen, even if it's just one person at a time. I have to hope that we're going to evolve out of this phase that this country is in right now. I don't have a lot of confidence that's going to happen quickly, but if any of the people that were vocal at this event would reach out to Access Humboldt or to you, perhaps a future dialogue could be set up with some ground rules. It can't be just shouting and stating one point of view. The idea would be to learn from each other. And that's what the Human Rights Commission tries very hard to do on a regular basis.
I'd like to go more into what the Human Rights Commission actually does right after this quick break. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talks. You're here with me, your host, Talvi Freed. We're also here with David Frank, Æpryl Nikolai, and Jim Glover. Jim, I kind of wanted to ask you, what does the Human Rights Commission do, and for what reason would somebody reach out to the Human Rights Commission?
Okay, the Human Rights Commission is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. As I think I mentioned earlier, we have up to 15 members, 3 members from each of the 5 supervisorial districts. The idea is that we are a watchdog agency. We don't have any regulatory clout, but we can recommend to the Board of Supervisors or to cities in the area actions that we think they ought to consider in improving the human rights environment in our area. And we're talking about everything from race relations to incarcerated individuals, both male and female. Definitely have dealt a great deal with homeless issues. And one of my goals in joining the Human Rights Commission years ago was the subject of gay issues. And it isn't often that it has come up, and not too many people reach out to us for help, but there is a phone number, 707-268-2548, which is a message line. If we can help in any way, or respond to questions from the community, whether you have a particular issue yourself or you know somebody that does, we'd be more than happy to try to intervene if possible. But mostly we're an advisory group. A lot of times people aren't even aware that we exist. We're trying to change that. And part of our rapid response effort is aimed at doing just that, specifically when we have something like this that comes along.
Have you had anybody reach out from the, I mean, obviously we reached out to you because we wanted you on the show to get your take on it, though. Have you had any members of the public reach out with complaints about this?
Not yet. But that phone number may not be a household word, so, or a number. So maybe that will change.
I hope so. What's that phone number again?
707-268-2548.
2548. I'm gonna write it down and put it on my refrigerator, just because you never know. This was at the Jefferson Center. Okay, I didn't recognize that because I heard the lady talking about how it was at a school, and I know the Jefferson Center. Is that even considered a school? That's the Jefferson Center.
Not anymore.
It used to be, but it isn't now.
Their only argument was that there's a Head Start there as well.
Well, good. We need more Head Starts. It seems like all my friends with kids are always complaining about childcare. So my mom worked for Head Start. It was a good program. And from what I'm aware, nobody part of Head Start ever spoke. Those are children under the age of 5. Nobody ever spoke to them about things of that matter. Just saying. I'm still sitting here in awe that somebody could actually have those words coming out of their mouth and think that that's a normal thing to. Pedophiles and child molesters. These are 2 words that screaming them around children, accusing their family members. People may dress up in costumes a lot in Humboldt, but that does not mean that they are not part of the community and families themselves with children and a life. And it's just nuts to me. Perhaps I shouldn't say that. That's.
So Talvi, if you don't mind, I just want to jump in and take one of your cues here. You're kind of saying to yourself, like, what brings people to make this thought process? And it's one of the classic logical fallacies. So it's actually well known that people make, it's called the faulty generalization. You have one data point and you extrapolate that out, and suddenly you project it, and it sort of poisons or pollutes your brain's ability to process information. So one of the guys I talked to, and I'm not going to go on and on about it, I'm just going to be real brief. What he said was, he asked, "Do you know what a minor attracted person is?" And then he said,
Wait, what was that?
A minor. He asked rhetorically, "Do you know what a minor attracted person is?" Oh. And then he answered his own question. It's a pedophile. And he said, Democratic professors all over the country are looking to get rid of this word, trying to normalize it. But we see people like this all over America getting arrested, right? So he goes on and on to explain why he's got this visceral, whatever the lack of freak out about seeing children around people in drag. It literally was, and it's also projecting onto the curriculum and the more broad acceptance of transgender members of our community, really coming from a position of ignorance. Like I said, I'm not going to get super data nerdy here, but I know you said you like data.
I do.
So Gallup has started collecting data about 10 years ago on American self-identification, and the trend, the trajectory is startling. And the cohorts basically by the year you were born, the generation you're in, it's stark. And I've seen different people cover it in different ways. Like Bill Maher covered it on his show, and he extrapolated it out, and he basically, he was very dismissive of the current trends as somehow not reflecting science and sort of an authentic realization of how people live their lives and people's preferences and people's true identities. He sort of played, he's a comedian after all. I wouldn't expect him to be thoughtful or based in science in any way. But I think the thing that stood out to me is that, overall there's been an uptick, and about Gallup says that about 7% and change of people, 7.2 or something like that. I could probably get you the exact number relatively quickly. 7.1% of adults self-identify as being LGBT. And so that's an uptick. And folks, before I was born, I'm old now, but before I was born, I've got uncles and cousins and grandparents, all of all different genders and persuasions and sexual preferences, etc. And they confided in me as a very young child. So I've been lucky to be exposed to these ideas my whole life. It doesn't seem very provocative. But millennials, so around the time I was growing up, whatever, 1981 through 96, that's the millennial generation. Those are people that were born during that time. The going number at that point, those folks, it was about 10%, 1 in 10 people. And now the most recent data just recently released is 1 in 5 people self-identify if you're from Gen Z, so people born after 1997. So what we have now, we went from a period where you couldn't talk about it because you would be persecuted or violently harmed or ostracized from your family or community, to now where people are openly allowed to really explore how they feel in life and be, I don't want to be, go on too far about this. I think I said I wouldn't, but it's important to realize that this is where we're at. That if it's really the case that more than 1 in 20 people that you see on the street self-identifies as LGBT, how is it possible that you would let one example from one Fox News story or one right-wing propaganda, disinformation, misinformation campaign skew you? You would let one person, if you're Christian and you believe in the fallibility of mankind and that there are sinners out there, people make mistakes, some people are broken, whatever. There's gonna be some people out there who are harming other people. It's just a reality. But to project that onto a group that represents, over 1 in 5 people, and that are young people, that they're going to somehow go out and harm other folks, like, that's just insane. And so we're really dealing with it's a mass hysteria. So Talvi, that's a long way of saying it's no wonder that you're sort of flabbergasted about the direction that this conversation has taken in our community, because that's the direction it's taken across the country, and that's what's being projected in the media, and that's what both April and Jim are here for, is so that we can be here representing an open conversation for our community to address the reality of these are our neighbors, our families, our friends, and our peers.
And it's interesting that right now we're talking about this kind of an issue, but just a few months ago we were talking about racial issues. We're moving from one group to another, and you can almost predict the verbiage that's going to be used in the arguments before it even starts. It's very, very sad. It's just sad.
It is sad. I have a somewhat public comment here. Aside from the gender, sexuality issue, drag, trans, etc., how is dressing up in a costume any different than people in Muppet costumes or Teletubbies? I think it's the gender and identity thing more than fantasy dress up and fun. And yeah, I think that's what the people were protesting, is the identity that comes with it. and yes, what is the difference between somebody dressing up as a princess fairy godmother versus Kermit the Frog? Not much.
We
But
don't expect the kid dressing up as Kermit the Frog to remain Kermit the Frog. When he's out of the costume, he's back to him or herself.
Yeah, and I think that goes for drag as well, though. Drag, burlesque, vaudevillian shows, people who dress up as mermaids and go swimming. Once you take the costume off, you're still yourself. But I think that's also something that people who believe in, that woman probably believes that when she takes off her Sunday church clothes, that she's still herself. And that's a costume. What you wear to the grocery store is a costume, even if it's just a t-shirt and jeans, and underneath it you're still going to be yourself. And you can try to dress up that child as a boy child or a girl child, whatever you perceive that to be, though underneath it all they're always going to be themselves. And to repress that nature is going to create a lot of issues. To instill a fear of themselves and a fear of others just creates more hate crimes. And it's an issue, though. Again, we are going to go into the final closing comments. I mean, it's something to keep in mind. How do we have an open dialogue? I haven't had any calls from or texts or anything from anybody who opposes what we're saying. Nobody's like, hey, me and my church, we're there, and we don't like those sisters of perpetual indulgence. So where do we go from here? Let's start off with David. Everybody, you have about a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Thanks for the timer. I need it sometimes, apparently. But so, I was raised Catholic, and I'm originally from New Jersey, and the father who was the bishop of our diocese went on to become one of the named parties in the lawsuit, the huge, mega lawsuits against the Catholic Church for hiding for decades and generations the abuse of children. So there's real abuse out there. It's not like there's not. But we still went to church, and we still benefited from the community of faith. And we also, I would argue, the same thing that comes with any group. I had a former supervisor at Johnson & Johnson. He was in the Army, and he said, the Army's so big, we're a microcosm of every problem in the entire world, every problem in the entire country. If there's a problem, it's in the Army because we're just so big. And well, that same thing hits home here to Humboldt. Basically, we're a big enough, we're small, but we're big enough that we've got all the problems from everywhere else. And so they're going to be there. But the way that we tackle them is together. And the approach of fear and ignorance is divisive and destructive. And I hope that we are able to confront it head on collectively, and with where there's going to be fits and starts, but hopefully we're successful going forward.
Thank you, David. April, any final thoughts?
Well, how to dialogue. That's just a matter of them also be willing to talk and try to understand our points of view on all of these things. Everybody that's not in their personal collective of thought. And if that were to be able to be happening a lot more, that would be very helpful. It's just when it comes to instances of Sunday where even when trying to talk to them reasonably, it keeps coming back to, like we said before, blanket statements and just generalizations. It's really difficult. It's saying the same things over and over and coming back to the same points, or just breaking it down to the whole concept of all of it is just wrong. That's quite a blanket statement in and of itself. But try and get the dialogue to it with them. I'm hoping if that does happen, it does. If not, I'm hoping they'll either back off or here to at least stay within the letter of the law, let's say. Not be going out and doing anything to anyone, or trying to, for that matter, because it won't be met well. There's been a massive amount of support from the community in general on this point. That's what's just happened, and yeah, it is a lot to take in. And as you said, just the things I was saying, it was flabbergasting. was just really overwhelming to keep trying to hear the same stuff and trying to have an argument for something that seemed so. We've worked past this as humans.
Thank you, April. Jim, any final thoughts?
Nothing that hasn't already been said except to say that we need to learn how to talk with each other and to each other and not at each other. And I think that we need to remember that although Humboldt County is kind of an isolated area in the overall scheme of this country, we're not cut off from all of the hate and the misinformation that is everywhere right now. And I think the healthiest thing any of us can do, no matter how you come down on this, is to question your own beliefs. If you strongly believe this and you're running up against some opposition, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe that person can take a few minutes and explain their point of view to you, and you might be willing to listen to it.
Thank you, Jim. That's just about all the time we have in the show. I want to thank our guests, David Frank, Æpryl Nikolai, Jim Glover. You can listen to the repeat of this show Friday night at 8 p.m. Stay tuned because David Frank is going to be the co-host for Redwood Wonk. Of course, be sure to send us an email, kzzh@accesshumboldt.net. You can find us on YouTube. Just look up Access Humboldt, and then Thursday Night Talks if you want to catch up on the rest of it. I'm your local host, Talvi Fried, and I will see you next week at the same time right here on KZZH.